Just the other day, this big, beautiful peony flower bloomed, and I mean, it is huge and gorgeous. I think it's the only flower on the entire plant. It literally put all of its energy into this one bloom, but it is absolutely fantastic. And it also became the inspiration for my painting today, so that is an additional bonus. This piece is just so simple and so fun to do, and the best part is that I will be showing you how easy it is to create these beautiful loose peony flowers using just a Filbert brush. So go grab your watercolor supplies. This is a tutorial you are not going to want to miss. First off, we need watercolor paper. I've actually cut mine down to the size of 8 by 10 so I can frame it later, but you can choose whatever size you'd like, or you can just pull out a paper and simply practice on it a bit before you try applying it to a full-on painting. Then, of course, I have my watercolor paints, a paper towel, and some clean water. We'll be using a few different brushes today, but the main brushes for this piece are first a cat's tongue brush, which actually is optional, but I plan to use it for the leaves of the painting today. This happens to be a 3/8 inch cat's tongue. Then the star brushes for today are these Filbert brushes. These, along with the cat's tongue I just showed you, are all going to be included in my upcoming 12-month water class subscription boxes. I have 4 of the Filbert brushes of all different sizes, a 5/8 inch, a 1/2 inch, a 3/8 inch, and a 1/4 inch. I'm hoping this subscription will be ready in just 1 or maybe 2 months, so make sure you sign up using the link in the description of this video to be notified when they are available. This is just 5 out of the 24 total brushes that will be included in the subscription boxes. Now, I think I will be painting a little bit on the smaller side today, so I'll put the largest Filbert brush away, but just as a side note, this technique will be the same with any size of Filbert brush. All it does is change how large or small the strokes will be. Now, I am just going to be freehanding this painting today, which is not my strong suit, so we'll just cross our fingers and see how this goes. But let's start out with maybe the 1/2 inch Filbert first to paint in the largest peonies on the page. So I'll just pull out a nice pink onto my palette for the flowers. This is a quinacridone rose. And you know what? Actually, let's just try a little something here to give you a bit of a head start using the Filbert brush. Now, normally in a lot of my tutorials when I use round brushes, I will tell you to start the stroke using the tip of the brush, then you press down and pull out to create the petal stroke. With the Filbert, we are actually going to be doing the opposite. And the reason for that is because the nice curved rounded top on the bristles we have creates the perfect tip of a petal. You can start these strokes with the rounded end of the petal and then curve or turn the brush to more of a thin side to finish the stroke out a little bit more fine. You can create all sorts of different sizes and looks by simply turning or angling the brush a little bit differently in your hand or pulling or curving the stroke out in different ways. I recommend, if you are new to the Filbert brush, to just pull out a scrap piece of watercolor paper and play around with the different types of strokes you can make, just so you can be a little bit more familiar and comfortable with the movements and what this can do. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to trying out one of these peonies using some of these strokes that we just tried out. I plan to paint 2 of these flowers sort of in the center of the page at an approximate angle to each other. So this first one I'll try a little bit more in the upper left-hand corner. And I actually don't want my color to be too dark in value yet either, so I have added a little bit of extra water in the pigment just to lighten it up a little bit. I'll pick a spot and just make my first couple of strokes here just like we practiced. This first petal will be sort of the center point, and then I will continue to go back and forth from either side, adding in a few more petals. But each time I do, I'll start to curve the stroke a little bit so that they gently cup around this middle one. I'll also start creating an overall semicircle shape with the main look of them as a whole. Now that I've got kind of that front portion of the flower placed in here, I'll take a touch more paint, maybe a slightly darker or more concentrated version of the quinacridone rose, and apply a little bit of that around the bottom sections of these petals while that initial paint is still wet, so that it will gently blend and bleed into the petals, creating a nice gradient of color. Continuing on, I'll paint in the top area of the flower next. I'll just be using a nice light pink for this and some very small brush strokes. As you do this, you're going to want to leave an open white space in the center area of the flower for where the stamen of the peony will be painted in later. And you'll notice for these strokes, I'm really almost just pressing the top of the bristles down in almost a stamp-like way. We're just really keeping this very loose. Okay, now we can just continue to build on this base outline of the flower by adding in some side petals that are sort of just swiping from the side into the center area of the flower. And again, if you like, go ahead and add some of that darker pink color in here a little bit too to add some extra depth. Now let's try adding the front or bottom layers of the petals. Really, I'm going to be doing this in a very similar way, but I may turn my paper a little bit so that I can more easily pull the strokes up into the center of the flower. I also kind of like to have these petals be a little bit shorter and a little bit fatter, so use 2 or even 3 of these strokes to create a single petal shape if you need to. Now, this is a great base or foundation for this flower, but at this point you may feel like you need to add in a few more petals to kind of finish off the shape a little bit better. I think that is the case for me, so I will just go ahead and add in a few more petal strokes here and there to round it off a little bit better. But you are the artist for your work, so you'll have to be the judge on your painting. I hope you're enjoying the tutorial so far. I tend to use round brushes more than any other type of brush, but it really is fun to play around with other brush types sometimes. This is a super easy and fun loose flower to create. Of course, it might take some practice to get the hang of it first, just like anything, but once as you've got these basic strokes down, you really can whip out these peonies pretty quickly. And if you find that you're enjoying my painting and teaching style today, make sure you subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss out on any of my new and upcoming weekly tutorials. Okay, I think I will call that done before I accidentally overdo it. Now, just to make things a little bit easier on myself, I'm actually going to just turn my paper upside down here to paint in the second peony. That way I can literally paint it in the exact same way in pretty much the exact same position on my page. I'm going to change up the color a little bit though for this one. Instead of the bright pink, I think I'll pull out some alizarin crimson this time. But again, I'll start with maybe a lighter or more watered down version and then add in some darker, more concentrated paint for the shadow accents. But really, I'm just going to paint this in just the same way as before. The biggest trick I think to this is to gauge where it's being painted so that the bottom of the flower sort of meet or even overlap the other flower on the page. We want these two flowers to be very close together and even touching when we're done so that our composition looks close-knit instead of being spread out too far. Okay, wasn't that fun? And it didn't turn out too bad either. Let's see if we can add in a few smaller flowers now to sort of fill out the composition a bit. I'll switch over to a smaller filbert brush now. Let's see. I actually can't decide which one here. Maybe let's try the 1/4 inch filbert and see what we can do with this. I'd also like to change up my colors a little bit for these smaller flowers. Maybe we'll try a nice blue-violet color. I'll just take a little bit of ultramarine blue and mix it with a touch of dioxazine purple. Now this is going to be a pretty color. Now these flowers are going to be a little bit more simple, but we're really just using the same basic strokes that we did on the larger flowers. With these little flowers, we'll just paint some petal shapes around in a circle, leaving a small white space open in the center of the flower. Now something you want to try to do here is paint the petals using different sizes. Some of them I'll maybe combine 2 strokes together to make it a little more thick, and some I'll paint a little more thin. This just makes it look a little bit more natural and organic. The other thing to remember is to try to curve the petals a bit more on the sides and the bottom of the flower. It's also a good idea to paint these in nice and close to those larger flowers to make a close-knit composition. All right, I like that. Maybe I'll try another one of these flowers only using the 3/8 inch brush now instead so that it will be slightly larger. Okay, great. I think that's all I will do of these open blue flowers for now, but if you feel like your composition needs more, by all means feel free to add whatever you want. That is the joy of painting a little bit more free-handed and loose. You can kind of just roll with the punches. At this point, I think it would be nice to maybe add in some bud-like shapes of these same flowers now, maybe spreading out to the corners of the page. So I'll switch back to the 1/4 inch filbert again and just paint in a few strokes to create a bud or flower that looks like it's just barely beginning to open. Of course, the fewer strokes you add in here, the smaller the flower or bud will look. I really like those. A good rule of thumb when creating a composition is to have big, medium, and small shapes. So now that we've created that feel, I may go ahead and add in just a few more of these buds next to the open blue flowers as well. Okay, that looks pretty good for now. I may come back in and add a few more of these small flowers in just a minute, but at this point, I think it might be a good idea to paint in some greenery next and just see what that adds to the piece. Now you can use whatever brush you like to paint in the leaves with today. I'm going to be using the cat's tongue brush. I really love the loose looking leaves that this brush can make, and I think it will really fit in well with this overall composition. I'll just mix up a little bit of olive green with maybe a bit of hooker's green for a nice, dark, natural looking color. Then as I paint these leaves in, I'll start with the tip and thin side of the brush and turn it slightly as I move down to the more flat or thick side of the brush. And of course you can add 2 or 3 of these strokes to make it a little bit more thick. I might even leave a white space in the center of the leaf so that it can kind of match with the style of flowers that I've painted, just loose and free. The trick here is to put in a good amount of leaves without overdoing it. It can be easy to get carried away and add more than you really need. Just keep in mind you can always add more later, but you can't take them off once as they're there. I think maybe I better call it on the leaves before I get carried away. So maybe I will just let that sit for a minute, and let's go ahead and paint in some of the stems of the leaves and flowers. I'll just pull out a nice small thin round brush. This is a size number 2, and this is going to be also included in my subscription boxes. I'll just go ahead and add in a little bit of greenery at the base of the buds, followed by some nice thin stem lines leading into the main floral spray. Now that I've had a minute to look at this and think about it, and I have a better idea of what my overall composition is looking like, I think I might go ahead and add in a few more flower buds just to finish this off. And I guess I should have taped my paper down earlier because it's starting to warp a little bit. So I'm just going to quickly tape my paper down and then continue on. I'm not sure that I like the white spaces in the very center area of the page. I might just take a tiny bit of a risk and do something here that either may or may not work. But I think I'm just going to take a touch of light green paint and paint that in a few of these small areas to fill this out a little bit. You know, when you paint freehanded without any sort of outline, you really are kind of just making it up as you go. So sometimes you are going to have to add a few extra things in here to finish it off how you like. And it's also a good idea to keep in mind that for this same reason, even though we all might be painting the same subject, all of our paintings are going to turn out slightly different, which is the fun thing. It just kind of makes all of our paintings unique and individual. I think that turned out okay. So moving on, maybe I'll take some of this green paint here and just paint in some small circles of dots in the centers of these open flowers. Of course, you can do any color you like, yellow or orange or black. This is just what I chose to try out today. Let's go ahead and finish off the last little detail to this painting and we can call it done for the day. Let's paint in the stamen area of the peony flowers. I'll just pull out a little bit of gamboge and then maybe some cadmium orange for this spot. And I did pull out a number 6 round to paint this part in as well. I'll start with the gamboge and just paint in some dots of color throughout this open center area first. Then while that paint is still wet, I'll take some of the cadmium orange and add that in here, focusing the color mostly on the bottom half of the stamen for a bit of shadow look. All right, I think we can call this loose peony floral spray done. This was so much fun to do. It's not too complicated and really doesn't take a ton of time either. Perfect for a quick painting fix. I'm so glad you joined me today. I hope you had some fun and maybe even learned something new. If you did enjoy this tutorial, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel so I can continue to help you discover your artistic side.